Lawrence, I
Here we go. All right, everybody. I'll call the special meeting of council January 12th to order at 2:30 p.m. and ask if there are any amendments to the agenda.
through Mayor Lawrence, I have none.
Thank you. A motion to confirm the agenda for the special meeting of council January 12th, moved by Councillor Fanlon, seconded by Councillor Lego. All in favor? Carried. And declarations of pecuniary interest.
Through Mayor Lawrence, I do have one from Councillor Howie respecting item 4.1, the review of the bylaw to establish and regulate a fire department. Councillor Howie has advised that deemed by virtue of Section 3 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act to share the interest of a family member and therefore am abiding by my obligation under Section 5 of that statute. So in accordance with our procedures, when we begin discussion of item 4.1, Councillor Howie will turn off his camera and microphone.
Very good. And you know how to do that, Councillor Howie, so we'll just watch you say goodbye. And you to come back, how do we get word to Councillor Howie to come back?
I believe Councillor Howie will likely monitor the conversation. He will still be able to hear and see.
Yep, here we go. Yep.
Hear and see him.
The microphone, not a speaker. Good. Thank you. Staff reports. Well, here we are at section 4.1. The council reviews the summary table regarding the current capacity of emergency services provided in Sioux as attached to the emergency services manager fire chief's report dated January 12th, 2022, and further that council provides direction on core emergency services to be provided to the community of Sioux that will meet the Ontario Fire Protection and Prevention Act, current standards, and established recommendations from the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office. A mover. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Timpson, and that opens the floor to the staff. So CIO, through you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through me to Bob, we'll let Mr. Popovich go through his report with council.
All right, thank you. So we have to start off with, so all the municipalities should have a fire department. And there was one established, or there's been established one here for many years. And there was a bylaw from 1970, bylaw number 843, that established a fire department. And then there was also an amendment of 1021 to that bylaw. So basically it from, well, just to provide some clarification on that, back then in 1970, there was different requirements for the fire department. And as we are now in 2022, there's all kinds of other requirements that or services that could be provided to the public of Sioux Lookout. So as part of that, the bylaw will have to be amended or repealed and replaced with a new one that provides better direction to this department as to what services we could provide. And so that led to this staff report. So well, the fire service gets lots of direction from the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office and Emergency Management, the OFMEM. You're able to see that throughout the whole document. And there's numerous services that could be provided from the municipality to the community. So there's like 28 core services. And from there, rather than having to put together a bylaw that says this is what we could provide, through the direction of the CEO, we came up with this table that outlines the services that could be provided to the municipality. And there's, you can see from there's 33 of them, and we'll just go through each one of those core services and provide, like if we can listen to some questions, I'll provide some clarification as to anything that may come up with each one of those items. One of the things that I want to just clarify as well is that there's lots of certification and clarification that comes from the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, and that basically governs pretty much everything a fire service does and how they do it. And in that, there's close to 100 certifications or standards for the department or any fire service. And it outlines exactly how everything is being done.
Could I, sorry to interrupt. Councilors, could you make sure you're on mute? There's some background noise coming in. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Lawrence. So the NFPA document or standards is quite a lengthy standard that would be quite several days to be able to go through, but there are some key ones that provide a little bit of direction as to what services the municipality can provide. So if you'll notice in there, there's in that table that we can talk about later, so I'll be referencing the NFPA quite a bit. Is there any questions so far before we dive into that 11/17 document?
I see none from council so far.
All right, so yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I guess we can just go through that document, basically that table that we put together that helps explain what services are available based on the recommendations from the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office, and what services we could provide and what services that we won't be providing. So if you look at the table there, row 1 is basic firefighting services and no rescue components. Basically, that would just provide exterior type fire protection with no entry. So that's what that fire rescue portion does, is that if there was somebody trapped inside of a building, that service would not be provided. It will just strictly be based on exterior type attack with no specialized training for rescue. So that's a pretty basic requirement for most municipalities to be able to provide that. And there's no additional, as you can see from the columns, there's a description, current capacity, equipment required, training required, and the recommendations. So current capacity, we provide that. The equipment required, that there'll be no additional equipment because we already have all the bunker gear that the firefighters wear, the breathing apparatus, tools, axes and shovels and nozzles and hoses and trucks. So all that is already there. Any questions so far? So I'll jump into number 2, which is this. So this is the structural firefighting. This is which includes the rescue. So this would require further training over and above the basics. So this would require for you to wear your mask, your breathing apparatus, to be able to go inside of a building and conduct a search of the building, to be able to put out the fire inside of a building, to be able to rescue any occupant that may have been trapped inside the building. So this portion here is a lot more involved and requires a lot more training for the firefighters. So we have most of the equipment, if not all the equipment required to be able to do a proper search and rescue, as well as a proper extinguishing of the fires. But there are going to be additional training over and above what the training that we already do, as there's going to be some changes happening. I was just on a call early this week from the Fire Marshal's Office, and you may have heard about it, the mandatory requirement for certification of all firefighters. That was talked about probably close to 4 years now. When the Liberal government was in place, they were putting forward legislation requiring that all firefighters be certified to NFPA standards for any type of firefighting or rescue type services. And because of the change in government, that process for legislation never occurred, but it was still in the background, and there were still some discussions between organizations and associations on and proceeding that way. So from that call that occurred this week, they are looking at implementing the mandatory certification of firefighters, and they're looking at putting something out to the fire chiefs and to more municipalities regarding that requirement by the end of this month. So that would put a lot more requirements on the municipality to provide the necessary training for all the firefighters. But yeah, so based on that, right now the training that the firefighters receive are follow Nfpa requirements, but it's not tested to that requirement. So there has to be some special adjunct instructors coming in place to be able to ensure that everyone meets those standards. So there's a lot more requirement, and it could be delayed because of COVID. That could be an issue there, but so far that's what the direction that the fire marshals is going is towards that. So that would require even more training than what was identified on my list here of an extra $9,000 worth of training, and that may require even bringing in people. One of the things too is that we looked, or the fire marshal office did, there was an announcement that the fire college was closing. There was a college for firefighters to get training in Gravenhurst. So because of COVID and everything else, they decided to close it, and because they couldn't, that facility couldn't be used. And in place of that, the fire marshal purchased 2 training trailers, one for the north, one for the south. So we'll have access to that, and then that training trailer will be able to allow the firefighters to test to the Nfpa standard. And there's all kinds of things that are required for firefighters to demonstrate that their ability that they can meet that standard. So one of the standards is called Nfpa 1001, and there's firefighter 1, which is basic type firefighting, and then firefighter 2. So there's definitely quite a bit of requirement on the firefighters to meet this training, and there's a lot of commitment required by them. There's an excellent bunch of firefighters that we have here, 33 altogether, between officers, deputy chief, district chiefs, and that's going to all have to be accounted for, and all the firefighters are going to have to get this type of training to be able to remain, I guess, on the department. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of hesitancy by other departments, other fire chiefs regarding that, because it's going to cause some issues with the volunteer firefighters, because it's going to require a lot more time on their part because of the extra training. But that's something that we can talk about a little bit later as we move along down this document. So those are the basic 2 line items that should be provided at a minimum for our fire department, and then later on we'll go into a little bit more specialized type work, services and training that's required to maintain those services. It's quite technical right now, especially with Nfpa and all that other stuff, but I'm trying to make it a little bit easier for everyone to understand. So if there's any questions, let me know. I hope to be able to answer them.
All right, council, questions at this point? Councillor Timpson. Sorry, Councillor Timpson, you're still on mute. You'll need to tread water harder. You're sinking into the lake there. You're
Okay, is that it? Got it now?
Yep.
Yeah, I had my PDF up, so something happened. Okay. Bob, I was your department would be doing most of these things anyways, correct? mean, most of the things you've listed, if you were called, you would do it anyways. And that's my impression. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence. It's things that have been done in the past, and with the new requirements in occupational health and safety, all these items require firefighters to be trained on and tested towards. So even though like there are some things that the fire department has done, things have been changing to be able to accommodate new regulations and new certifications and standards.
So would that mean that if the council didn't approve this, and we have to do a new bylaw anyways, I understand, is that correct? Then
Yes.
you really wouldn't be allowed to do that. Is that correct? Or if we didn't put them in the bylaw, you wouldn't be permitted to do them? Is that? Am I understanding it correctly? I guess that's.
Yes, that's the
Yeah.
intent of this staff report, is to get direction from council as to what services they want to provide to the community. Yeah.
And my other question was, is there anything in that list that potentially could be done by another body? I'm just thinking of the first aid. Does the EMS service do that? Are we duplicating in any way any of this?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, that there are some items that are not going to be done by that, and but we can talk about that. And there's several columns in there, or items that for services that I can explain further as to what we can do and what we can't do.
I think the fire chief would like to go through it row by row. So we're on row 2 right now, the structural firefighting. And then as each one comes up, Councillor Timpson, I think there's the question is this appropriate for us to do, or is there some other service that can do it, or whatever? Rather than try to make a sweeping comment right now. I think that's your intent. Is it, fire chief, to go through each one row by row?
Yes.
Councillor Lego.
For me, it's gonna be hard to give a yes or no as councillors, we have no idea what the budget's gonna be like. For me, I need to see the budget before I can make a decision on any of these items.
CAO.
This isn't through you, Mayor Lawrence. This isn't in reference to Councillor Lego's recent comment. It's just perhaps just for a little bit more clarity as you go through each of the line items, Bob, if you can tell what we currently provide. So for example, on lines 1 and 2, items 1 and 2, we currently provide that service now, so that for more clarity for council, and maybe highlight the ones that are that you're suggesting that we provide that we don't currently provide or need to be enhanced. Thank you.
Yes, I will do that. Otherwise, I'll just keep going.
A question, Fire Chief, on the last column where training, the last 2 columns, recommended and there's training required, $9,000. I guess 2 questions, or maybe more. You've talked about one trailer for Northern Ontario. It sounds like that would be stretched pretty thin with all the fire departments across the north. When would we have access to that? Did the province, when they imposed this, did they put a deadline on when the training must be done? How many members must be trained, et cetera? What kind of time frame? Do we have to do all this, plan for it all in this coming year, or can we spread it out over the next 3 or 4 years?
Interesting. I booked a trailer for end of May. However, that may not be here because there's, as you can imagine, there are several fire departments considered in the north of Ontario. And I don't think they have actually defined where Northern Ontario starts and ends. oh, we know where it ends. It ends pretty much at the Manitoba border and in the US, but it's a large, massive area. And there's 440 fire departments in Ontario, as you can imagine, and 2 training trailers. So they are trying to prioritize in certain areas and so forth. But I booked it for our area at the end of May. Does that mean it's going to come here? Probably not. Right now, they're offering that trailer there's no cost to the municipality, which is great. It'll arrive with, be delivered with propane and instructors to be able to provide that. As for your other questions regarding when will they make it mandatory for the certification, they haven't outlined that. I'm guessing that they're still working on that document, and that's why it's not going to be available till the end of January. Who knows, it could be end of February before they can define as to how they can implement mandatory certifications for fire departments. All full-time career departments have certified firefighters, whereas a lot of volunteer departments are not there. A lot of fire departments are leading to get there, but it's quite a large task to be able to commit to that kind of training. I know like Dryden does certification training, and it's looking at 100 hours of training, and they managed to get that done with new firefighters. I think they have it within a 9-month period that they can get that type of certification done, but it's a massive commitment. There's probably 8 to 20 hours of training a week for several months to get this done. So
Yeah, when you say 440 fire departments, there's 444 municipalities. I'm not sure what the other 4 municipalities do, but and we are mid-size. 5,000 is sort of the median population size of municipalities in Ontario. So there's a whole lot of pressure on a lot of small municipalities with pretty scarce resources to do this. I'd be very interested to know the time frame. CAO, is your hand up?
Just to provide a little bit of background, when the previous government brought that legislation in to have the mandatory training of all firefighters, there was a lot of pushback from municipalities for that reason, because a lot of them didn't have the financial resources or the capacity to do that training in short order. And there was the ability to grandfather some of the firefighters that had been in service for X number of years. So I imagine that, if and when this legislation comes back to the table, that there'll be significant discussion surrounding that as well, and the ability to obtain that training either for free or have something subsidized for our departments, or perhaps grandfathering once again.
Just for clarification, is what we're looking at now legislated or being considered for legislation?
It's not legislated at this time.
Okay, thank you. Clerk.
Through you, Lawrence, and I'll ask the manager of emergency services to correct me if I'm wrong, but just for council, just to clarify for council, where it talks about wages, so that's not talking about bringing in people to do training. That's just the firefighter wages to attend training. And the other piece to that is this is not a one-time cost. This is an annual cost. So just to be clear, that it will not impact not only the 2022 budget, but all future budgets, and that those costs will likely increase year over year as inflation and all that kind of stuff happens. So I just wanted to clarify that as well.
Thank you.
yeah, through you, Mayor Lawrence, that's correct.
So why don't we move on to item 3?
All right, item 3. So that's vehicle firefighting. That's not any type of rescue. As you can imagine, it could be rolled into item 1, but also it can be also rolled into item number 13, which is the vehicle accidents and vehicle extrication. So vehicle firefighting is just strictly, there's a vehicle on fire, we put it out. So we have the equipment and the training for that. So that, like this is how the fire marshal is identified as to list of services that we can provide. So it's a little bit different than a structural firefighter. So it's, but it's it's something that it's already being, something that we already do, and the equipment we already have. Grass, brush fire, and forestry firefighting. Again, it's another standard that we have to provide to meet to be able to provide that service. We provide fairly limited forest fire fighting because we have an excellent crew for MNR that provides that service, and our area to provide protection when it comes to forest fire is limited. We have an agreement with the Ministry of Natural Resources to provide fire protection within the municipality. They provided a map. I do believe it's 30 meters on either side of the highway. There's an area around Hudson. There's an area around Sioux Lookout, and that is defined as our responsibility, municipal protection. And then there is the Crown Protection Area that MNR would be responsible for, and that's a service that the municipality pays from the Ministry of Natural Resources. So there is not a lot of effort required on that, but things are with forest fires are becoming a lot more problematic and a lot more due to climate change. As you can tell from last year, there was quite a bit of forest fire activity in our area. And will it get better or worse? You know, we won't know. But overall, it's something that we should be prepared, especially what happened in Red Lake. They had to protect their municipality, so they had to put on sprinklers, put up forest or proper pumps and all that stuff. So they were limited to be able to have that equipment. They did get most of the equipment from Ministry of Natural Resources, but it's one thing that would be important for us as a municipality is to have that equipment, so that way we could provide some protection. An area that that we're concerned most about is the hospital, because there's that it's the proximity to the forest fire, or not forest fire, but the forest or a wooded area is quite large and very close to a building that is deemed fairly important and almost very difficult to be able to evacuate because of the residents or the occupants that are inside that building. So we have to do a lot more to be able to protect that building, along with that 100,000 liter propane tank that they have outside. So that's one of the things I put in there, to be able to have additional pumps and sprinklers and hoses so that we can provide that protection.
Lego.
Yeah, does the hospital not already have a sprinkler system set up at that propane? You would think that would be a logical thing for the government to provide.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, no, they do not. There was an exercise a few years ago where the Ministry of Natural Resources did a simulation to be able to know how much they have to protect. But no, they do not. They have sprinklers inside the building.
Is there a way to get the government to pay for something like that? You would think they'd want to protect that, as it's their property.
I am not sure. I have to take a look at that. It could be something that may be placed on the municipality to provide that protection, similar to like if there's an interior fire that we would provide that protection. So is it something that would be preventative, like we do fire prevention and public education, and then requirement of fire safety plans within the hospital? But I'd have to find out if there's anything that would be required to protect the exterior of the building.
Yeah. Well, you would think with the bush line being so close to the hospital there that they would have considered this, or maybe that's part of your job to provide some information for them to consider this instead of going to the taxpayers to.
Well, that's just one of the buildings, right? Too, like there's all kinds of other buildings that would be beneficial to have additional sprinklers and hoses and pumps to be able to provide that protection. I know that Red Lake had a significant amount of hoses and sprinklers. I think they pretty much consumed all the sprinklers that they had.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yeah, I believe there's a program within the ministry, the fire program. It's called Fire Smart, and it's about making your home more fire resilient and spacing of trees and bush and removing dry fines and stuff away. So that would be something, and I believe they do have a person dedicated to that position out of Dryden. So if this is something that's a concern for the community, that should be something maybe we have a discussion with the hospital about making that hospital fire smart and providing protection for that tank and the infrastructure up there.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, that's correct. There is a program, and I think there's I'm in the process of working on putting a funding request to that. I'm not sure exactly how much that amount is. But it's very specific as to what you can do with it, and a lot of education is included in that.
When the hospital was built, the building code wouldn't have, it doesn't become engaged in matters such as the proximity to the bush line or whatever. And the Fire Smart, it becomes, I think, Councillor Cassidy, owner dependent, and the ministry will come in and help, but the costs associated with making it, upgrading to fire smartness, is the owner's cost. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
So just get back to the brush fires and grass fires. You made it. Sorry, what I'm hearing is that there are certain grasslands and brush sites and bush within the boundaries of the municipality that is our responsibility to fire protect. Is any of that crown land within the municipality?
There's a significant amount of crown land within our municipality that the province protects.
And do we have to protect any of that?
Only within, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's like where the cluster of houses are. So like within Sioux, they define that area. So like the city center kind of airport area, that we have to protect that. There's 30 meters on either side of the highway that is our responsibility to protect. Anything outside of that would become the ministry's responsibility to protect.
And do we get paid for it? So the province expanded our boundaries to go from 6.5 square kilometers to 650, included much crown land within that, brushland, etc., and provincial highways, and then told us we don't own that land, they do, and we can't do anything about it. And now we're being asked to pay to protect it. Should we not be invoicing back to the province for that fire protection?
Go ahead.
Through Mayor Lawrence, if I may, I think this may shed some light on this particular discussion. The municipality actually entered into an agreement with the then Ministry of Natural Resources regarding forest fire management in 2008, which clearly outlines our responsibilities and the ministry's responsibilities in this regard. So, to sort of try to distill and drill down to the crux of what we're talking about here, the fire chief is recommending additional training to the tune of $6,000 per year in wages and $5,000 for an initial investment in sprinklers, which he's saying will help us fulfill our obligations to fight bush type fires that fall within our responsibility, as discussed already by the fire chief and as contemplated under this agreement that we have with the ministry. I hope that helps.
For sure, thanks.
Through you, Mary Lawrence, that's very good. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so if you compare the area that the ministry protects versus our area, it's like quite different. It's like it's not even half. Like it's like more like 20% and the 80%. And the amount of area that they protect for the amount of what they invoice us for the agreement is a pretty good deal. But this is the equipment that I'm asking for, is to be more proactive and to be prepared to be able to provide that protection. And it's mainly because of the sprinklers and be able to, and it also will include Hudson, because they're really close to proximity to the forest. So there could be houses in there. It's something that we should have on hand So that way we can deploy them quicker than having to wait for it, them on our trailer to be able to deploy it. So it's, and if we have multiple fires in the area, the resources to be able to protect our infrastructure would be difficult if we don't have our own equipment. So that's one of the recommendations when I talk to the fire chief in Red Lake is a good idea, have your own stuff. I'm hoping that clarifies item number 4, and we'll proceed to item number 5, which is the marine firefighting.
Through Mayor Lawrence, if I may, I believe the fire chief is also looking for sort of yays and nays as we go through as to whether or not this is something that should be included in the bylaw. So I just noticed that part we haven't been doing.
Sorry, Clerk, I think it might be a bit much to ask council to say yay or nay on each item as we go through. I think to get the overview first, to run through this, and then, I mean, I'm with Councillor Lego in a sense, that what's the impact on the budget here, and what are the priorities? You know, these aren't listed in order of priority, they're listed by row number, I would think. So I'm not sure that. Are you suggesting that we be saying go ahead with this and build it into the budget?
Through Mayor Lawrence, that was the primary intent of the meeting. It was supposed to be a meeting very similar to the procedure bylaw, where council went through line by line. Yes, we want this. No, we don't want that, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult for the emergency services manager to draft a bylaw if council doesn't provide direction on what types of services they want included.
Yeah, just the procedural bylaw didn't have cost implications for every line item.
Correct. And through you, Mayor Lawrence, I mean, the bottom line here is that if council was to say yes to everything, it would be $108,000 increase to the budget this year and in coming years. That's sort of the bottom line. So
I'm council can tell me otherwise, but I don't think that it would be a good idea for us to say yay or nay to each item as we go through without considering the whole and then figuring out other priorities. I don't know. It's I'm not sure. Council, weigh in. Thanks, Councillor Cassidy.
Yeah, I think the recommendation is kind of built into this as well. So maybe if we're just going through and discussing the items, if there's a counselor that feels it contradicts the recommendation, bring it forward and we open it for discussion. If we decide to strike it, we decide to strike it. If there's no objection, we continue to move on and bring it around at the end, I guess. But for me, I have a tough time because I think a lot of this stuff we had been doing to some extent, and now we're officially being telling our fire department, we are doing this now and we are giving you the budget to do the training, to do it. And that is about the liability if we have our fire department doing an ice rescue, they're not properly trained and something happens, that comes back to the municipality. And for me, I tend to agree with a lot of the recommendations from the fire chief on this. I understand the implications on the budget, but I think this is coming down to something that these are services for the community. It's $100,000, but some of these training and methods that we are deciding here to undertake could result in saving lives. And having a fire department that has the ability and the training to do that and prevent that, it's tough to pick out stuff and say no on, just in my opinion.
Councillor Legal.
Well, if you go through the list, there's a bunch of no's on there already, especially ice or water rescue. There's numbers there, but I'm pretty sure that they said no on them to not do.
Rescues,
So,
yes.
yeah, for me, I need to see the complete budget. We're asking to provide these services, which are good services to have, but is that taking away from another department? So I can't make a decision without seeing what every other department wants. And we know how budgets go. We negotiate it, and it's usually negotiated down because everyone's putting everything in that they want. And then we got to figure out what the taxpayers can pay for all of it. So, and
Yeah,
there's going to be other increases that we already know that are coming this year. So if I look at the first 1 to 15, you're looking at $39,000 in wages and $10,000 in equipment. If you want to put that into the budget, and we'll negotiate it.
Yeah, it seems to me like we are piecemealing the budget up for this one department and doing a departmental review of this budget increase for this coming budget. Why aren't we doing that for Public Works and for every other department? I'm just curious. It just seems a little bit out of sync to me. Councillor Fallon.
Yeah, this is, we should look around us. We're not alone to Bush and stuff like that. If this is, some of this stuff had been put in place, I think about 5-6 years ago, with all the development that we're doing, they're not paying attention to the brush and the trees that are around some of these houses, and very expensive houses. And everybody wants to keep the trees. And I think it's a good thing, but we can't be taking things away from it just because it's costing us money. It's got to be done, and for the people of the municipality, it's not something easy to say, and we can do it without it, but we can't. Not in today's age. You got Ministry of Labor and Nfpa and the fire marshal's office looking down at you and say, you got to get this done today or tomorrow, sort of thing. So I think what I would like to see is just go through the program and then work our way back. Have discussions about why we got it and what it's for.
Yeah, I think if we can go through it all, and I don't think there's anybody who's going to probably not say we approve this in principle, as Councillor Cassidy says, or Councillor Lego, Councillor Fallon. It's all great, absolutely. And then, I mean, what about we approve it in principle, bring it to the budget, but when you bring it to the budget, like other departments, you might get sent back to say, prioritize some of your needs, and in budget number 2, come back with priorities, spread it, if any of it can be spread out or whatever. It seems to me we can't be asked right now to pre-approve this for a budget, and then it comes to budget and it's already approved. Is that what we're doing here? CAO, help me.
The main reason for this report is to, because our establish and regulating bylaw is so antiquated, it's from the 70s. We needed to update it, and when our emergency services manager, Robert Pofovich, was hired last year, he was going through bylaws and stuff like that, and he recognized that a lot of the stuff, so for example, we are doing some services right now that are not we're not fully trained on, or don't have the adequate training, and we're providing those services as per our old ENR bylaw, or we aren't providing services we aren't providing services that are in our ENR bylaw right now. So it needs to be updated. So that's the primary purpose of this meeting here, is the ENR bylaw, to establish what services we do want to provide. Yes, there's a cost associated with it. For example, Councillor Cassidy mentioned earlier about our current what services we provide in ice rescue. that's something that we need specialized training in that we don't have, and we tend to do it from a moral perspective, but the liability is still there for the municipality where we're not fully trained. So this is where we're looking for council for direction. Do we actually want to do that type of training? Then if we do, we have to include it in our E&R bylaw. Yes, there's a cost associated with it. If it's going to come down to budget talks, then what I would recommend to council at this point is that we stop this discussion. We include those figures in our budget and discuss it at that time, but we still have to return to our E&R bylaw in the near future to update it, to make sure that we're providing the services that council wants us to provide from our fire department.
Councillor Lego.
I agree with the statement from the CEO that this should be all brought to the budget and it'll be negotiated. And once everything is finalized in the budget, then a new bylaw can be written on what will be provided to the citizens of our area.
And what are you, Councillor Cassidy? Yeah.
I think the fact that we've assigned a price tag to every line item and the fact that our budget meeting is around the corner is kind of skewing the perspective on this. I think we need to just look at this as our fire department bylaw regulating what services we want our fire department to have. And we need to look at this and say, do we want this service? Yes or no? And if that's the case, and it comes to the budget and we see the budget high, then we bring that forward in the budget, and that goes to staff to provide direction on what they're going to take away or how they balance the budget and bring it down to zero. I think that is kind of skewing our perspective on this. I'm okay to continue with this discussion. I think there's stuff that we should be providing direction on and what we should be doing and what we want our fire department to look like and what training we want our firefighters to have. I think the budget talks need to come out at the budget meeting, and that will have the feedback from this discussion on what we want our fire department to look like. So I kind of agree with Mayor Lawrence's comment about us picking through how a department operates prior to the budget meeting.
Anybody else? Councillor Timpson.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it sort of goes back to the question I had before. If we put it into the bylaw, and given that these are recommendations, not requirements, that's my understanding. They're recommendations from the Nfpa, not requirements. But if we put them in the bylaw, are we then obligated to provide this training in areas where there hasn't been the training?
Mayor Lawrence, yes.
Okay.
You, Mary Lawrence, I would also require the equipment as well, along with the training and all the additional resources required.
Okay. And if we didn't put it in the bylaw, and well, if we didn't put ice rescue in the bylaw, and there was a call for somebody needing ice rescue, would you then have to say no? Is that?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, yes, we'd have to say we don't provide that service and we won't get those calls. And
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, given that we're basically a volunteer department with people having other obligations in their lives, is it feasible that they would be able to do this take part in this extra training? Because it looks like it's a fair number of hours that they'd be obligated to attend, I presume on weekends, I don't know, or during the week.
yeah, through you, Mayor Lawrence, there would be a training required to be able to provide the services that council chooses to have available to the public, and that's the intent of that direction that I'm asking for. And yeah, it's always a commitment by firefighters, volunteers, to be able to provide the service with the expectations of them having the training and the equipment to be able to provide that. So it's a commitment for sure. It is.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if there could be, has there been consultation with the department, the firefighters, as to whether they are willing to commit these hours to this training?
There's indirect discussions with the firefighters. As you can imagine, firefighters are the type that want to be able to help no matter what. And so they want to be able to do this type of stuff. But at the same time, I'm looking at it as a health and safety and Ministry of Labor and WSIB, is that if we deploy our firefighters, our department, our equipment and resources, they need to have that training specific to the task that they're required. So it's, if firefighters want to be able to do that and the municipality wants them to do it, then the expectation is to have that training. And what I led to before is that the province is going to be mandating certification. So when that comes about, it's going to be a lot more time required by firefighters, and therefore more wages will be required to be able to meet those certifications.
Councilor Lego.
Yeah, so basically right now I'm good with 1 to 15. Those are the ones that you've added prices to for wages and equipment. The rest of them that are zeros that either you're already providing we're already providing these services. So that would be a total of $39,000 in wages and $10,000 in equipment. And for the rest, maybe look at 2023 to bring forward those ones. That's just my suggestion. You can put for me, you can put the 39,000 in the budget for wages and 10,000 for equipment, and we can figure it out at the budget table.
Councilor Fallon, you had your hand up.
Just, I guess the question for Bob and a little not explanation, but I think it was about a year ago that in the springtime, there was somebody stranded out on Vermilion at the back landing. And they were in a 6x6 towing something on the lake, not on the lake, but on the ice, and they broke through the ice. So what do you do with those people? You say hi, goodbye, and who's the closest people around our area to do water ice rescue? I don't know what Bob thinks about that there. I believe it's the OPP.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, and yeah, that is correct. It would be OPP would be taking a lead on that. Again, it's one of those things that we don't have the equipment, the training to be able to provide that type of rescue. That's always a challenge, and I realized that this staff report, it was going to be lengthy because there's a lot to discuss and a lot of thinking required to be able to present it in a way that you can make a decision, informed decision. And it's always like we had an incident there where there's a accident with a snowmobile on Sioux Mountain. We don't have snowmobiles on the fire department. We have firefighters that have personal snow machines. They have personal sleighs and so forth. And to initiate that type of rescue requires the municipality to have snow machines. And you can't just have two, because you need, like in the fire service, we always have backups. And so then you would have to have another set of snow machines, and you need trailers, you need trucks, you need the sleighs, and you can't just have a regular sleigh where you can transport someone just on a backboard and an open sleigh. You'd have to have a proper enclosed trailer with suspension to be able to protect the patient. And then not only that is now you have to have advanced EMT training, perhaps even rope rescue. It becomes a large thing that is beyond what, financially and the commitment required by firefighters to be able to perform that. Like, I know that the firefighters would like to have that service, but it's all about the risk that the municipality is willing to take. And if this is a service that the municipality wants to do, then it's a commitment to the fire department to have the dollars and for the training and equipment. So as you can imagine, it's quite it can get expensive as to, if, there's certain things I put in there as no, because the amount of equipment that's required, like to extinguish a fire on an island seems simple enough, but we don't have a boat. And we don't have a large enough boat to be able to do that. I've talked to other fire chiefs, and a typical boat that they use is $250,000. And you just can't have one, you need two. So now now it's a boat that's owned by the municipality. Now it becomes a commercial boat. So now you got commercial licenses, and it's not you're not an operator of the boat, you're a pilot of the boat. So now you got to have specialized licenses, and that $10,000 a firefighter to be able to get that type of training. So, and that's what the direction I would like to, like if we decide that we want to do this, the municipality, there's cost associated with that. And if you prefer that we just cover up that last column and we can just go through explanation as to what services are available to be able to provide the municipalities to look at, and which ones we should be providing. And it's a tough call. This is something that is probably not an easy decision to make, but it's something that's required because it provides us guidance as to what services we provide or don't provide. And when a rescue does come in, we can, that it's protected, right?
So I like your suggestion of covering up the right-hand column for now, going through the various, your 33 rows. You're describing what the services are, and also whether you recommend that we have that service or not, I think is one of the things that you're doing. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor, that is correct.
Yeah, and then my feeling is that then you put together in your budget, your budget request, working with staff that includes your recommendations and your costs, and then be prepared to react, as all departments have to sometimes, to the push and pull of budget pressure.
So,
And recognizing too, I mean, everybody wants the maximum level possible of protection, for sure, but there's also what's realistic for us to provide. What can we provide?
through you, Mayor Lauren, that is correct. And it's so like the CEO said, that every line item, there's a cost implication, whether it's no cost because it's something that's already, I have budget for it. It's $95,000 for salary for between Hudson and Sioux for paying for all the fire calls that firefighters attend, the standby that they have, and the training that they have. And that's the amount of money that we have so far, and that's how much we've expended. Actually, this year we expended more than the budget because of the all the extra training that was required to be able to meet certain requirements. But it's just trying to,
I guess,
so so I can explain through this, and then we go to the budget, and once the budget approves what I'm asking for, then we have to develop the ENR bylaw to define what we provide. So that would be probably the last step after we review this document, go through a budget, and then establish and create that ENR bylaw, establishing regulating bylaw for fire service.
okay, and I guess a couple of it is, did I hear the word mandatory at the beginning? The province is legislating, although this legislation hasn't passed. Are some of these services going to be mandatory that we must provide, and some are optional? How does all that tie into this?
through you, Mayor Lawrence, the province hasn't made any service mandatory. I'd have to take a look through that if the municipality is required to have a fire service. Mainly it would be governed by the insurance industry as well, and the fire marshal. I'd have to talk to the fire marshal's advisor to be able to determine if there's anything that it's a mandatory to required. I would assume the first two items would be probably, even the first one would be basic firefighting would be mandatory. As to what level of service you provide, whether you have 5 trucks or 1 truck, 2 firefighters, that there's a lot to it when you start calculating as to how that gets done.
Councillor Cassidy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just throwing out the suggestion if it's at all worthwhile for staff, if we're going to select what we want, if it would be beneficial if council was to prioritize the items we select. If there is pushback at budget time, it might make your decision on what the last thing on the list is to if we have to hold off on that or whatnot.
I guess I feel that's the role of the professional to prioritize and make recommendations to us on priority A, B, C, D. I mean, we have the ability to override that, but I truly think that this is where the fire chief, the emergency services manager, has the training and whatever to make the recommendations regarding priorities.
Yeah, that's fair enough. My other comment was with regards to the certification that's going to be required. Will we be rolling out any of this training prior to our staff if that certification comes? Like, we could potentially train a bunch of our staff with this, the certification comes, and then we could be potentially, if there are staff that don't want to do the certification or whatnot, as we kind of discussed the issues with this coming to smaller communities, we could lose staff that we had invested a bunch of money training in these items. Is that a possibility?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, when we do our training, we strive to meet the Nfpa requirements. So all the training that the firefighters receive meet most or all the Nfpa requirements. The one thing that is lacking is having it signed off or verified by an external agency such as the fire marshal's office or the Ontario Fire College to confirm that the firefighters have received the necessary training and understand what they have to do. That's the last step, is to be able to bring in that person. And what happens is that the tester or the exam invigilator would say, okay, well, we want you to perform this task, and then the firefighter has a certain amount of time to be able to perform that task, and it's a fail or pass. And there's a lot of requirements per like firefighter 1 and firefighter 2 that they have to meet, and it's random, they pick at random. So we are striving to get there. However, we would need additional, significantly more time for training to be able to master those skills to the point where they will successfully pass them.
Councilor Lego.
Is the fire department allowed to get a lottery license to do something like the hospitals 50-50? No, shaking heads, no.
Yeah.
Darn. What about the boot drive? You know, I know we'd like to give money to MS, but we also need equipment.
Councilor Timpson.
Yeah, one of the concerns I raised earlier, but sort of building on what Joe Cassidy said, we need to have the buy-in of the existing fire staff, I think, before we move so aggressively in this area, because if they aren't willing to participate in the training because of the timing, we will end up just losing firefighters and having to retrain more if we can find people. And I would like to suggest that there be some really good hard consultation with the firefighters as a group as to what they think, and and whether they're willing to be part of this, because I think their buy-in here is going to be really critical.
All right, can I suggest it, and CAO, please let me know otherwise, or Fire Chief, that we're on item, we've completed up to item 5. Can we, it's 3:35. Can we sort of target 4:30 as a max to get through to item 33? And maybe it's less time, and you give us an overview of each item without the final column. Is that fair enough?
Through your Mayor, that's doable.
Okay,
I like that idea.
so we'll go on to, I think we can go to, you can start off at automatic aid was where I think we were.
Through your Mayor Lawrence, I'll start with marine firefighting. So
Okay, good.
that's one of the things there, that it's a suggested service for a department to be able to provide. So since we don't have a boat here, it's not a service that can be done. If the boat is further away than the shore, then we can reach with our fire stream. So basically it would be more of a defensive, and if it's tied up to a shore, then we can provide that protection. Otherwise it's just strictly shore based. The automatic aid, number 6, it's something that there isn't on an automatic aid with anyone in Sioux Lookout. So that service is not required or not necessary. Mutual aid, there is a mutual aid association. It's called the Kenora District Fire Mutual Aid. And basically all the fire chiefs are part of that association or municipalities. And if any one municipality needs additional resources, trucks or manpower, we can deploy them to that municipality where they can bring resources to us. Actually, this last summer, Red Lake activated the mutual aid and asked all fire departments within that Kenora district to be able to provide them extra manpower due to the forest fire that was in there. So there's no additional cost on that part, other than sending firefighters there. Basic medical assistance, that's something that we already do. It's just basically CPR and AED. However, there's training that's required on that every 3 years, and it's depending if you're just renewing your CPR. There's a cost for firefighters to be able to attend the training, because they get paid for every hour that they go for training. So there's additional time required on them to be able to attend this training. So I believe it's between 2 to 3 days of training that's required for each firefighter every 3 years. So that's where that $6,000, I've basically taken the 33 divided over 3 years and go from there. Advanced medical assist, that is not something that we provide. We have our Northwest EMS that does a fantastic job, and we don't really, it's not something that we would be doing. At some point we were doing that in Hudson. There was 2 or 3, maybe 4. Councillor Fenlon probably tell us more about it, but yeah, it was a service that was provided, and it's an exceptional amount of time required. It's almost a full-time job to be able to for the training that's required to be a EMT. So it's not recommended as a service. Awareness level hazmat. So as part of as a basic firefighter requirement, you have to have your hazmat awareness. There is since this was not provided before in the past, it's something that each firefighter is required, and it's about 6 to 8 hours of additional training just to be aware of when hazmat is required. Hazmat operations, that's not something that we would do. We have access to the Ontario Fire Marshal's EPRU to be able to provide that service. Same thing with the technician level for hazmat awareness, or sorry, hazmat materials. It's something that requires extensive training and extensive amount of equipment. So there's several agencies that provide that service, that provide that can bring in the necessary resources. And if there's anything along the railway, CN has their own staff to be able to do that. Vehicle accidents, that's something that we provide and that we do. As you can imagine, there's specialized equipment and training again. Lots of our equipment is aging out. There's additional equipment that we would make the job a lot more easier to accomplish. We have some basic tools and some of the I guess the extrication tools that we have, but there's additional stabilization chains and all that stuff that is required to be able to enhance our and provide safer environment for the firefighters and the patients or the victim that we're trying to extricate. One of the things too is that, we'll go to the next one, 14. So vehicle extrication, that leads into between the other two. So that I kind of piggybacked the requirements of 14 into 13, as you can see from also vehicle firefighting from 3 to 13. So rather than trying to separate it a little bit more, I put them all together. One of the things too is that, like with training and providing a service, I'm not sure if lots of you have noticed that, but there's a lot more electric vehicles in Sioux Lookout, and they require even more specialized training to be able to recognize how to put out a battery fire. And it's something that we have to look into and to be able to provide that service, because battery fires are exceptionally dangerous and I guess requires additional resources and staff to be able to do that. And so we have to be able to accommodate for that. That's 14. 15, transportation incidents involving vehicles and trains, aircraft and watercraft. Response should be provided large scale. So that's something that is we assist with CN to be able to provide that and be able to that's almost in line of emergency preparedness, emergency management, because those types of incidents require basically all of us, and it's not just the firefighters. It probably requires public works and the whole municipal emergency control group to be able to activate it, because those types of accidents are probably a lot more involved. So those are like almost like hazmat type. So that would involve multi-agency type resources. 16, 17, 18, that could be probably grouped together. We have some basic equipment, tools, and training on that. I know that Councillor Label talked about that, like up to 15, and 16, 17, 18 is something that is a lot more involved. And right now we provide basically shore-based. So if we can reach the person with a rope, or with a we have a reach tool, so we can reach them. And there's changes coming down to change the type of equipment and training required to be able to effectively do a water rescue or ice rescue. And that's going to involve new equipment. The equipment that we have here will no longer be valid. They'll have to be replaced with newer dry suits, newer flotation devices, all that stuff. And it requires a lot more equipment along with training, because now if we're trying to reach someone or go somewhere, we need also, the firefighters will be required to meet mandatory or certification related to rope rescue. This is all intertwined, so it's like yeah, it's a little bit interesting, because everything is going to be intertwined as to what we do. Like there's a special section on water rescue, there's a special section on ice rescue, there's a special section on swift water rescue. So if you can imagine, like if there's someone that fell in the lake by the bridge, that's deemed swift water rescue. And again, you would need another level of training, equipment, and resources to be able to do that. So it's one of those things like, where do you start and end? So, and it's difficult to just be able to do a little bit, because when you're a firefighter, you only be able, you see the person, and your SOGs, your SOPs, and your bylaw says you cannot do that effective rescue. So it's one of those things that we either we do it all, or we make that decision not to do it.
Question from Councillor Cassidy.
Yeah, Bob, what advantage does having the training up to the technician level give us over just having the operations level?
The technician level allows the firefighter to don a suit and enter the water.
So for an ice rescue, if that was something
That's
that
right.
would be okay.
Yeah, because you're effectively going on frozen water, so then you would need to have a full immersion suit, like a flotation device. And it's not just like you need to have, you're going in pairs, then you have to have a backup to the pairs and so forth.
Councillor Lego.
Just in regards to the technician level water rescue, for wages 12,000. How many people, is that just one person to get trained, or?
For you, Mayor Lawrence, that would be just a small amount, because that may require them to travel outside the area to be able to get that training. They may require to go to Southern Ontario or somewhere in that area, or bring in a person to be able to do that. So it wouldn't be everyone. It'll just, and technically anyone that enters into the water would have to have that technician level. So as you can imagine, it's something that, and it's a training or certification that requires to be renewed. So it's not something that you get once and kind of forget about it. Like it's going to be required to have an annual recertification or refresher type training. So that's why I put in there per year, per annum, is that, like, and then it's not something that we start off with having 24 firefighters available as a technician level. We slowly ramp up to get to that.
Okay, thank you.
So the water rescue is also ice water rescue, and if you dig deeper in there, you can see the everything else. There's surf rescue, that which we don't need in Sioux Lookout, but swift water rescue, ice water rescue, and then there's dive rescue. I understand that they're going to be removing that as a in Ontario, because there's only one fire department that does dive rescue, so it's not something that we provide, or most departments don't do that. And as part of the water rescue, I'll go into that later on as we go into the next items. So public assistance, we do that on a regular basis, like if someone needs any help with moving things around, it's something that we would provide. It'd be basic stuff, and there's minimal cost for training on that, if any. Ambulance assistance, we provide that already. It's fairly limited because the ambulance or the EMS service already has the resources, but sometimes if they need to move a patient from one floor to another floor, they may need the extra firefighters to be able to provide that assistance to be able to move. Other than on a few occasions now, we've been asked to assist with that, but there's no additional training or equipment required to do that. Police assistance, limited. Sometimes the police ask us for assistance, but again, it's dependent on what they're asking for, and if we have the training and the equipment to be able to provide that. So overall, it's something that we can provide that to the police, again, depending on what their ask is. Public utilities, I know it's one of those things that's in the list of suggested services by the fire marshals. There's no additional cost. There's minimal requirement for training and equipment, But again, it's all dependent on what's being asked, and it's all going to be dependent on what they ask and the level of training and so forth. But overall, it's something that it could be provided. Community emergency plan participation, that's something that's a separate light item under the EM portion of the OFMEM is emergency management. It's something that we were required to provide. Whether it's something that the firefighters are required to, it's not. It's something more of a, for me and the municipal emergency control group. But there are times when firefighters were asked to be able to assist with the community or the emergency plan. Urban search and rescue, that it defines between light and heavy. And again, it's one of those items that under the Nfpa could be broken down significantly as to how you want to provide that. And it's not something that I recommend that we perform. We have access to the OFMEM, their EPRU. So if there's any kind of a structural collapse or anything like that, we would be asking for assistance on that. And it's not something that I would recommend that we provide, because there would be a significant amount of training and tools and material required for that. Same thing goes with rope rescue. However, having said that, depending on council's direction on whether we want to provide ice rescue, water rescue, or any other rescues, rope rescue is an integral part of that service. So if we, and I think I mentioned it before, that they're making changes to the Nfpa and to be able to include rope as part of that water rescue and ice rescue. So that may be required, and I haven't developed a cost for that because, again, it's one of those things that it's we don't have the equipment to be able to do that. We need specialized ropes, carabiners, pulleys, all that stuff, harnesses. There's all kinds of things that are required to be able to provide that service. And again, it's one of those, it's that same type level. There's awareness, ops for operations, and technician level. So each one of those requires specific type of training, and it's not done in Sioux Lookout. Again, it will have to be done outside of Sioux Lookout and brought in rescuers or training. Confined space rescue, we have certain limited retrieval. So if someone is trapped in a manhole, we have some equipment to be able to effectively, without making entry, to be able to pull that person out. So it's something that we could provide with the resources or the training that we have. There will be additional training required, and as along with additional equipment, because what we found out with the equipment that we have is that we'll need more of it to be able to provide that service effectively. Farm and silo rescue, it's not something we would provide. Role of assistant to the fire marshal, that's something that we provide, that we're required to provide. I am an assistant to the fire marshal by default as a fire chief, and officers can be and are assistants to fire marshal. If you need instruction as to what does that mean as to assistant to fire marshal, provides entry to a land. It provides there's a slew of things that are part of your assistant to fire marshal, but it's something that we'll probably talk about later if you really want to find out what that means, but it's something that we already provide. Highway incident services, that's something that, again, it's probably covered under the vehicle extrication, vehicle firefighting, and so forth. That's something that is provided, and it's actually a cost reimbursed. So if there's any kind of vehicle extrication or vehicle fires on provincial highways, the Ministry of Transportation reimburses the municipality for that service. They pay per hour per truck. So that's something that's cost recovered. So there's no cost for that incurred by the municipality. Rural firefighting operations. There's lots of area that's defined as rural. Any houses along Sturgeon, Drayton, Alcona, As well as there's further down south along the Highway 72, there's a rural firefighting that's required, and that requires training, which we already do that as part of our regular firefighter training, and that's covered under line item 2. And so that's already there. And one of the things I already kind of mentioned, line item number 31, is firefighting when there's no road access. And that's something that requires specialized equipment. I mentioned that we need the boats for that, multiple boats, all kinds of other equipment to be able to provide that service. So I recommend that we don't provide that, because it's a quite a bit of cost for the municipality to provide that service. I mentioned that before. It's like $500,000 to $1 million to be able to provide that service. And I know that there's lots of there's some municipalities, like especially around the Muskoka areas, that have that service, and I talked to the fire chief there, they have 4 of those boats. So it's not something that I would recommend that the municipality provide that service. Wilderness search and rescue, it's one of those, we've been asked to be able to help OPP be able to provide that service. Again, it's a Nfpa requirement to be able to provide that, have that training, and it's not something that we should be providing. We have access to the OPP and their search and rescue for that. Trench rescue and excavation rescue, again, we don't have the training or equipment to be able to provide that, so we'll just basic awareness levels to identify. Awareness just basically says we identify that there is resources and training that we need and who to contact, and that will be more than, and at the bottom there I say it's the OFM, the EPRU that we have access to. How long it takes to get here, we don't know, because if it's something that's super critical, they may fly them in, otherwise they wouldn't be driving in. And the last item, 33, this is something that's very new that that the fire marshal has placed on the municipality, is to be able to do animals left in the vehicles, to rescue them out, and there's specific training for that. It's a 2 to 3 hour video that each firefighter is to be able to watch, and to be able to provide effective rescue, when to rescue, when not to rescue. So as emergency responders, if there's an animal left in the vehicle, we have the right to extricate them. Apologize for the amount of extra material there, but I was at home hoping that'll help explain as to what levels, what each level is: awareness, operations, and technician. These are taken directly from the Nfpa standard, and it helps outline as to how and when we can be and where we can be at. Quick rundown. If there's any questions, I know this is it's a lot to absorb, and to be able to make a decision on it. It's something that would help our service to build as to when and how we provide, and it's a decision that has to be made by the council.
Very good. Thanks, Bob. I'll just make a few remarks before I can go to the table. Thanks very much. I think it's a huge. It seems like it's a huge step forward, going from a 1970s bylaw to this one, and lots has changed in between, and it looks like there's big changes that are perhaps impending right now. So thanks very much for putting this together. In terms of we do have a motion on the floor, which we will address, and it's to provide direction, and that direction can be as specific or as general as council determines, I think. And I'm interested in reaction. My take is that some of these things that you're recommending, and I think that everybody on council would probably support. And that forms the core of your beginning the new bylaw. I think to Councillor Timpson's, and maybe there was another councillor who said maybe, if not buy-in, but it's sort of your assessment in discussing with your volunteer staff, what their appetite is, how much training they can take up, what's their capacity for training in the next year, because there's no point in I think, in adopting a whole bunch of things that are then just going to float into another year's budget. It would, to me, it would depend on what's the capacity to deliver and receive the training. And in terms of the recommendations, I think there are some things that can be recommended. We'd all like to, if I'm out on the middle of the lake and I fall through the ice, I'd love to be rescued. My rescue has not huge community-wide impact, but fighting brush fires and doing some of those other things that could endanger large portions of the community really have a community-wide impact. And I'm not saying, I don't mean to demean that one rescue. You'd like to have it all, but I think you might sort of look at what are the areas where it has the largest community impact. And it seems some of those ones that are getting extremely specific training and skills and also costs might be the ones that you sort of develop a plan for over which might be a multi-year plan for how you implement this. But what would you want to bring to council in a bylaw and in this year's budget? And it would be, to me, your recommendations on priorities, given some of the things you've heard here, and your also your recommendations on capacities, both you as the leader of the team and your other leaders, the capacity for training to come into town or for people to go out of town, and your whole team to receive it. My thoughts. I'd be interested in council's thoughts, please. Councillor Lego.
Thanks, Bob, for this. It is really appreciated. And there's a lot of things that we need to update and get done for our community and to protect our community. There's lots of recommendations that are listed that have no cost associated with them or we're already doing. And those for sure can be added to the bylaw with no issue. I also believe that some of the core basics for the fire department, plus some of the recommendations that you will prioritize for council and to be brought forward to the budget, and also to continue over the years to bring what's not covered to future budgets, so we can assess them and see what's needed at that time, and also what's going to be mandated for the municipality, and to have those brought to us, to the council table and to the budget, and so we can move forward and hopefully in the next few years have everything that is desired by the fire department to be covered by the municipality at some point. I agree with Mayor Lawrence that this should be a multi-year task moving forward. I don't know if everything can be done this year. And again, it goes to how many firefighters are able to take the training. Are we putting money into training that's not going to be done this year? So that will be for you to decide. You're the head of that department. So I do appreciate you bringing this to us, and all of the stuff that you've listed is very important to the community. So thanks again.
Councillor Cassidy.
Yeah, I support that approach of moving forward with some prioritization on this and what's most important, and maybe developing kind of a multi-year approach to this as well. I like that idea. Start with the most, as Mayor Lawrence alluded to, the most, the areas that are going to affect the community in the most, have the largest impact, I guess, and then we can work ourselves out from there. I think there is a lot here, like, as much as it is nice to have it, maybe we don't have it all. Rome wasn't built in a day. So let's grow this and go from there. So I can support that.
Councillor Timpson, sorry, you're sitting low. Did you have your hand up? Yep, thank you.
Yeah. My only concern is that if we take it in incremental steps over a few years, if we have a bylaw, then and we don't have specific items in there that for which the workers have been trained, does this mean that we then could not offer that particular service? Because it seems to me that there's nothing in there that's recommended that I would want to see taken out. I mean, we do live in a risky environment, and there are a lot of things in there. I think that my concern is that if we don't go for broke on it, we won't be able to provide certain things until we have the bylaw amended in the future with the associated training and so on. It just, if I'm understanding this process correctly, it's almost like we go for broke or we don't go at all and just keep doing what we're doing.
Clerk.
Through Mayor Lawrence, yes. So, Councillor Timpson, to continue doing what we're doing really isn't an option, because we're referring to a bylaw that's almost 50 years old, that really the fire department has been operating without council's direction on the services it should be providing, which creates enormous liability for the municipality. So one way or another, a new E&R bylaw needs to be passed in 2022, sooner rather than later. If council chooses to phase in some of the services that it offers, then that would just mean that the bylaw would get amended annually or semi-annually or biannually, whatever frequency council deems appropriate. But you're also correct, Councillor Timpson, that if for example, ice rescue is one of the services that council wants to provide but doesn't feel it can afford to do so this year, then that would be excluded from the bylaw, and that service would not be provided until it's included in the bylaw.
Yeah, thanks. That's my concern, is that we either go for all of it but with consultation with the existing firefighters, is that they're going to be able to participate. I think that's really important.
Councillor Beth.
Yeah, I haven't been sitting quietly, just not ignoring you guys. It's a lot to take in one reading, and the concern I see with it is, number one is, this is what happens when you leave bylaws for 50 years. You know, we saw the same thing with water rates and whatnot. You know, you can't leave it. They have to be updated all the time. Obviously, we can't do all these at once, but I agree with Councillor. All of the things that are recommended are things we want and would like to have. They're things we probably need. But I can't possibly see how we would do them all at once. But you know, you have to, and I'm very concerned also with what Councillor Timpson has been mentioning about the burning out of the firefighters. If we start losing people because they just can't train properly, then we're going to be in another, it's a whole new world. So I'd like to see us phase this in a little bit, probably with some kind of priorities that would be established by the fire chief, and go from there. But it's just a lesson for us that we can't leave these bylaws sitting for this long and then expect to do it all in one shot. It's just not possible. So I like the idea of doing it incrementally, and I think that's right.
Council, any further comments? Fire chief, comments, questions?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lawrence, and Councillor Bath has a very good point there. It's a bylaw that was left for 50 years. Things have changed significantly in those 50 years. And actually, as part of the Nfpa requirement for a volunteer service, you're supposed to review your level of service annually, because you could be, you know, things could change, you know, certification level may increase or decrease, whatever else. You may increase firefighters or decrease firefighters or have a change in firefighters. So it's something that's required to be done annually, determine what level of service you provide. So, you know, like that bylaw should be, you know, like it could be amended more frequently than it should be, other than every 50 years, right? So it's something that's required to be reviewed. There's something that's coming along the legislation. Well, it's actually mandated that we provide a community risk assessment. And it's one of those things too that helps define what we could do. So, you know, like, and as part of that community risk assessment is also a master fire plan. That's something that we can discuss later on, but it's something that's important to help define the department, and a ENR bylaw is definitely a start, because if there's certain financial constraints, then there's certain services we can't do.
CIO, clerk, any comments?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence. So I'm not sure if the discussion is concluding, but if it is, I have a couple of recommendations with respect to the recommendation.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor Lawrence. So my recommendation is that the second paragraph be stricken and replaced with the specific direction, which I believe I have captured, and I can share with you based on what I've heard throughout this conversation, if you wish.
Yes, please.
So that the second part of the motion would read that council directs staff with respect to the ENR bylaw as a next step to consider a multi-year approach focused on the greatest impact and highest importance recommendations, to consider pending legislative requirements, to consider implementing the no-cost recommendations as soon as possible, to consider and a dialogue with volunteer firefighters with respect to their interest and availability for additional training to meet the recommended services, to focus on recommendations that have the largest impact to the community as a whole, and that the emergency services manager to overall prioritize the recommendations.
Fire Chief, any comments on that? I think you're the staff that's being referred to. They'll have to interpret, which I think was reasonably clear what the clerk said.
Yeah, it was through you, Mayor Lawrence. Yeah, well, I'll have to see how that works out, because I know it's a tough ask to be able to say we want to provide this service and there's a cost associated with it. One of the things too is that's not captured in my request is that in the establishing regulating bylaw, this is a portion that I thought would be require better direction and more explanation, is the suppressing fires and providing rescues. There's also another portion of the ENR, which is the fire prevention portion, which is the public education and fire prevention. So it's, as you can imagine, there's 3 lines of defense for fire service. Is first you start off with public education, provide that direction to the community and to prevent fires, right? So that's ultimately what we want to do. The second line of defense would be fire inspections and enforcement. That would be making sure that everyone has a working smoke alarm and issuing fines and be able to inspect buildings to ensure that they're safe. And, you know, like Councillor Cassidy said, also the fire smart, be able to implement that. And then the last line would be the fire suppression, which what we talked about in the rescue. So there's also, it's important that we, you know, like I guess it's on me to be able to ensure that the public is fire prevention and this training that we do a lot of training, but we hope to never use it. So it's important to be able to make sure that the public is aware that they have to do their part to prevent fires and to prevent us to having to implement our training and to use the equipment that we have. I'm perfectly fine with never having to use any of the training and never have the fire trucks leave. that's ultimately, that's where every fire department wants to. Is that something what every firefighter wants to do? No, because they want to be able to do something, right? And it's so. Thank you for taking the time to be able to review this. It's a lot to look at, to digest, to be able to. It's a lot, and it's something that's important for the community, and it'll help me perform my role here as a fire chief, because I have to now take all these things that are required or suggested and implement them into operational guidelines and procedures, and develop a training program to be able to do that. So this is only the start of what I have to do. And thank you for taking the time.
All right, CAO, you had something?
I just have a friendly amendment to the motion, just to add somewhere in there when you're referring to the willingness to take the training, something to that effect, and the capacity to do so.
I think there was a line about the interest and availability, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Put the capacity to do it.
Sorry, Michelle, can you clarify? Do you mean the capacity of the firefighters or the capacity of the fire department?
The capacity of the fire department as a whole,
Okay.
if that's okay with council.
We're going to find out. It was moved by Councillor Cassidy, I think was the mover, and he's giving a thumbs up to the overall friendly amendment, which is the first paragraph remains and the second paragraph is replaced with what the clerk read out, and additionally inserting the capacity of the fire department as a whole. And sorry, I forget again, do I need the seconder to approve the friendly amendment, clerk, or is it just the mover? No, it's just the mover. Yeah, thank you. So are you all set, clerk? You want to give it one more go, or is council good with what's being read? We're good with what's being read. And the fire chief is good with the direction. It's clear enough. Lots of work ahead. And before we vote on it, thank you very much to the fire chief for this, and thanks to the volunteer fire department. We understand we are very fortunate to have a volunteer fire department. We want to keep them, and we want them to have the best training that we can possibly provide within everybody's capacity to give and receive training and what have you. So thanks very much, Fire Chief. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we'll move into closed session, and we'll take a short break, a 5-minute break, once we're in closed session, if that's okay. So motion to move into closed session at 4:15 p.m. to discuss matters relating to a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, section 239 2K, one item, police services. Moved by Councillor Lego, seconded by Councillor Fallon. All in favor? Carried. We're now in closed session, and we will.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Lawrence.
Well, we're
yeah,
not.
we just have to actually hit the button to join.
We'll hit that button to join, and then we'll.
I believe he was going to say, then we'll take a break.
And we all made it back, it looks like. A report out from closed session. And clerk or CAO, you have a motion for us?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, yes. That council authorizes and gives first, second, and third reading to bylaw number 07-22, being a bylaw to authorize and direct the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement between the corporation of the municipality of Sioux and the Fixers Communications Group Incorporated for government relations consulting services.
Need a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Lego, seconded by Councillor Timpson. All in favor? Carried. And we have a confirmatory bylaw number 0122, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the municipality of Sioux Lookout, January 12th, 2022 special council meeting. We read a first, second, and third time and passed. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Fallon. All in favor? Carried. And we adjourn the meeting in the usual way. And I say thank you very much, council. Thanks, staff, for walking us back from the precipice and guiding us forward. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. See you next week.
Next week.
Yep.
Good night, everyone. Have a
Bye.
good one.
You too, Don.